Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today's video is a what we eat in a week. So for the people who are joining me, because these videos tend to attract a bit of a new audience as well as my regulars, I'm going to give you a little bit of a spiel and my regulars will just skip through as needed. So as I said, we're a family of 8 who live off-grid. We shop every 6 weeks. I travel about 4 hours away to do our groceries, and I do Aldi, Coles, Woolworths, Costco, Fruit and Veg, Butchers, Kmart and Bunnings. I do a big trip. It's pretty much the only time that I leave the property. Darryl does most of the other trips into town as needed for animal feed and the post office and things like that. So generally speaking, I go every 6 weeks to do the main grocery shopping, and unless there's some sort of medical appointments or something, I don't leave the property otherwise. In doing that, it means that we make what we purchase in that 6-week shopping trip last the 6 weeks. Darryl will occasionally purchase something in town, maybe some ham if we've got no cold meat left, or maybe a loaf of bread if I haven't made sourdough and we just want some quick sandwiches, or he does buy cow's milk in town because I use that to ferment milk kefir. So obviously you need fresh milk for that, so every week he might buy a 3 litre of that so we can make more milk kefir, and I use that for smoothies and stuff as well. Or he likes to buy me chocolate, so I get that treat as well. So other than that, all the meals that we make are pretty much made from the groceries that we purchase every 6 weeks and what we do with those groceries. So post the grocery haul, which I share because everyone likes to watch a grocery haul, I share videos of how I manage to make that food stretch. So all the meals that I prep and all the freezer meals, all the preserving, all that sort of thing, I do that in a run of videos. I release them every couple of days, and it's a couple of days worth of content to show you how I'm using those the 6 weekly grocery haul to make it last through the 6 weeks. Some of that food ends up traveling further than the 6 weeks, obviously, because when you're preserving things and putting them on the shelves, they are sometimes a lot more long term than just in the 6 weeks. But I show all the things that I do with that there, and any baking and anything else that I do along the way. I just share the days in my kitchen pretty much, which is a pretty large part of my life is spent in the kitchen. By choice, but also by necessity. The grocery hauls, as I said, are every 6 weeks, and then I do the run of videos showing what I do with it. I find that these what we eat in a week videos are well liked as well, because at times they are a bit of a dot point of the meals that I make over a week's period, and people like to watch that, especially people who aren't interested in seeing how meals are made, just are curious and wanting to get inspiration by the actual meals. I always liken the what we eat in a week videos a bit like to flicking through a recipe magazine or something. It just gives you these little ideas that you could potentially use for other things. So that's why I do them. YouTube likes them, and because some people just prefer to watch that than they would the long form sort of showing the actual stuff being made. So this is a week of meals, and this is post the food hamper. So once every 4 weeks we get, or once a month, we get a food hamper, which is from the food bank. It's from A4 Community Care through Aberdeen Pantry, and I pay $50 and you get whatever you get. There was a few extra bits and pieces this month that I had to get through as part of my food prep, and they probably are included in some of this eating. So this week of meals is pretty much the week post the hamper, so that I'm using up the stuff in the hamper as well as what was left in the groceries. There'll probably be one more that I'll do, which is the last week of the 6 week period, because people always like to see those meals as well, because they're normally ones that I'm stretching to get stuff made using some of the ingredients that have been preserved over the 6 weeks to use in that last week of meals. So enjoy watching, and I will see you at the end. Alrighty, so on the first day that I've got here, I sliced up some of the homemade bacon. So I showed that in the recent videos that I had cured the bacon and then I had smoked it. So now it's living in my fridge to be eaten throughout as long as it lasts. So I sliced up some of the homemade bacon. I cooked up some of the small flatbreads. So these are just the either sourdough or yeasted flatbread. I don't remember what they were this particular day, but they're just a small flatbread. Cooked the bacon in the cast iron, and then scrambled some eggs and spinach in the leftover fats. Now the homemade bacon creates a lot of excess fat in the pan, so it's really nice for either toasting your bread in or frying your eggs off in or that sort of thing. I still had some spinach that was good enough to use from the shopping trip, There's not, that might be the last lot that I managed to use. So we scrambled some eggs, spinach, and with the spinach put some mayo, bacon and eggs onto the flatbreads and had little like breakfast burrito type things. I also worked on a focaccia during the day, during the afternoon for the next day. So my focaccia is an overnight dough, so in the afternoon I mix it up and I coil fold it, and then overnight it proofs in the tray that I'm going to bake it in. So I have to work on that during the afternoon to get ready for the next day. For dinner that night I made coconut rice, which I just do with standard coconut cream, water and a little bit of palm sugar and rice cooked in an absorption method. We had steamed veg, and then the previously marinated and grilled satay chicken with satay sauce. So I showed that in one of the most recent videos. I showed how I had marinated it and cooked it off and got it ready to go. This is the Recipe Tin Eats satay chicken recipe. It was very nice but quite spicy. We would probably tone the spice down next time. There were a couple of complaints, but it was very nice. It had really good flavor, just the heat was a little too much, but anything with coconut rice always helps to dull that heat a little bit. The next day we had focaccia from the night before. So it had been cold overnight, and we hadn't taken it inside, or we hadn't run a fire, I can't remember which, but it wasn't proofed in time for breakfast or lunch, which is when I normally want to do it. So I normally want to proof it overnight, and then the next morning I'll bake it up first thing and we'll have it for lunch. So for lunch we had the leftover coconut rice with some homemade bacon and some of the smoked chicken tenders. It was very tasty, if a little bit of an odd sort of a mix, but very tasty. And then once I couldn't wait any longer, I dimpled the focaccia and baked it. It was definitely a little underproofed when I sliced it up, but totally edible. But normally, because I'd bring it inside when we have the fire on, it would normally be ready to bake pretty much first thing in the morning. And because we either didn't have a fire or I forgot to bring it inside, it wasn't proofed the same way it would. So it took all day to get to a point that I could bake. I served the kids soup and bread first, and then I made our own. So the kids like their soup. I use a couple of jars of the home canned soup from the shelf, and then they like macaroni pasta in it, and then I served it with bread. So I just heat the soup up to a boil, cook the pasta in the soup, and then serve it up like that. Quite often I feed them, and then I turn the camera on when I'm making the second batch of stuff, just because it's easier. So we had a jar of the loaded potato soup that I had canned. I'd forgotten to show this after canning, and someone had mentioned that. So this is what it looks like in the jar after it's been canned and when it's sitting on the shelf. I warmed it up. I used the hacket or the meat breaker-upper thingy to break up some of the potato to thicken the soup. You can pull a little bit of it out and like immersion blend it and then add it back in, but I find just breaking some of it up with a masher of some sort works well to just thicken that soup up a little bit. We served it with the fresh focaccia and a dollop of sour cream on top. A very filling, hearty winter meal. I really like this served as a meal. The next morning I cut up the leftover focaccia for everyone. I cooked off some of the homemade bacon and then fried the bread off in the fat, and then made a fresh batch of mayo and fried some eggs up for whoever wanted eggs as well. I tend to serve a lot of these meals platter style. I make sure that there's an even amount of pieces of bread, enough bacon for everyone, enough eggs for everyone, and then you can always go back and cook more eggs off if I need to or whatever. And then I just let them serve themselves from the tray, and some of them will choose to have peanut butter on the bread instead of bacon and eggs, and then someone else will have the extra eggs, but whatever they want, it's offered there for breakfast, and they can serve it however they want. Dinner was smoked beef stew. So I pulled the beef that I'd smoked out. I showed that I had smoked it in one of the most recent videos. So I just diced it up and put it in the smoker, hit it with smoke for 45-60 minutes. Means it was very rare in the middle still. So I diced it up a little bit smaller just because I wasn't going to slow cook this stew. It was going to be a fairly quick couple of hours at the most. I cooked off onion, carrot, celery and garlic in a pan, added the beef, a bit of tomato paste and the stock, and then I also added a bunch of diced potatoes. I was going to do some quick yeasted dinner rolls, but I didn't get there, so I ended up and if I had have done that, I wouldn't have thickened the stew as such, because it would have been more like a beef soup with the bread. But because I didn't do the bread, I ended up adding a bit of a flour slurry to thicken it all up and just served it as it was. So I just pulled a little bit of the hot stock out and whisked some flour through it, and then poured it back in, and then stirred it round, and it thickened up nicely. If I had have served it with bread, we probably would have got 2 meals out of it, but as it was, because we didn't have any sides on it, we pretty much, the 8 of us ate this entire pot in one sitting, which is fine. It was very tasty, but yeah, we might have got another meal out of it if I served it with bread. The next day was hamper day. I filmed the hamper, but I wasn't having a great day, so Darryl made us lunch from the hamper. We used bread from so we had like 4 loaves of bread in the hamper, so we used that. There was tomatoes in there as well. Grabbed some lettuce from the hydroponics bed out in the greenhouse and some of the homemade bacon, and made toasted BLTs for breakfast that day, or lunch. It was probably lunch because it would have been after the hamper arrived. For dinner, I attempted to cook the extra buttermilk chicken that I'd frozen. So a couple of videos, I made the buttermilk chicken and I fried it all off, deep fried it all, and I kept half of it aside because we only needed one half for the meal, and I froze it. And this time I tried cooking it from frozen. So all I did was put a rack over a baking tray and put the chicken on the rack and put it in the barbecue oven, whatever. It worked wonderfully. It was tasty still, it was crunchy, it was still moist. It's definitely a winner, that one. I'll have to make that again. So I have to go to if it was worth the effort to fry up a large batch and only heat that oil once, and then have it there to cook for a different meal, than to have to marinate and dredge and fry more than once, if that makes sense. So, yeah, anyway. So we served that with some of the green beans from the hamper, cooked in the cast iron with some sesame seeds, garlic, and a bit of oyster sauce, and the crumbed broccoli nuggets from last month's hamper that I'd forgot to use, and some mashed potatoes. So that was dinner that night. The next day, I'd put pizza dough together the night before. So sourdough is our preference for pizza dough, and we let it proof overnight. So I had mixed it all up and then put it in a container and let it proof overnight. And then the next day, I have to shape it and put it in the fridge. So the next morning, I split it into 8 balls. So it ends up being about 8 250-gram balls that the dough makes, which gives us a pizza each. It gives the opportunity for me to customize the toppings for each pizza for each child, and then they can choose to eat it all in one meal if that's what they want, or a lot of them end up putting it on, like in Glad wrap on plates, and having it the next day for breakfast. So leftover cold pizza appears to be a favorite of most of my children, apparently. For lunch, we had some of the bread from the hamper with some of the homemade bacon fried up. I found some of the baby spinach that was still okay in the box from the grocery haul. So this was the last of the baby spinach that we could use. The rest of it went to the ducks. But it wasn't much. And considering that how long it lasted, I'm pretty happy with that. I fried eggs in it, and then I made a bit of dairy-free hollandaise for breakfast. So I used Nuttelex and I made it in the Thermomix, and it's really simple to make hollandaise in the Thermomix. You basically throw it all in and turn it on, and there you go, you got hollandaise. It is fantastic. It saves me having to whisk over a water bath, and that, you know, the amount of times I've scrambled hollandaise accidentally when just getting distracted. So making it in the Thermomix is wonderful. So I made enough toast for the kids as well, and as I said, most of the time I do a platter. So I made extra eggs, and there was extra hollandaise left over, and there was baby spinach, and then toast, and I let them serve themselves as they wished. For dinner, we had the pizzas. There's a range of toppings that I do. To a degree, I take requests within the scope of what I'm willing to pull out to use. So we use anchovies, marinated mushrooms. They're the main two that are chosen or not chosen to put on their pizzas. Pineapple from the shelf that I've canned. Pizza sauce that I canned. There's a video of me canning that recently. We use tin corn, which always gets a few raised eyebrows, but I really like corn on my pizza, so you should try it if you haven't tried it. Salami, caramelized onion jam from the shelf. I'd also defrosted some of the pulled pork butt, which was carnita style pork butt. And I also sliced up some of the end of one of the pieces of homemade bacon. So a very well covered pizza with lots of tasty toppings. I put cheese on mine because I can, and I'm cutting it out of the oven here, once it was out of the oven here. I used the Bakerstone pizza box on top of the barbecue, which I bought from Bunnings, and there is a review on my channel for it. But the first time I used it, I didn't like it as much as I do now. I found that it didn't get hot enough, so what I need to do is close the hood on the barbecue to keep that the heat high enough, and once we figured that out, it takes only a couple of minutes to cook each pizza, and if anything, it's easy to burn them because when it's heated up, it doesn't take long at all. These sourdough pizza crusts do really, really well in it. They end up really light and chewy and delicious. Definitely worth the time and effort to cook them this way and to make the dough for them. The next day I had to sort the chicken fillets that I'd got in the hamper. So as I said, I get a A4 Community Care or Aberdeen Pantry hamper every month, approximately every 4 weeks. And this hamper had a blue frozen bag that was just labelled fillets that I assumed was chicken fillets, and it was. So on the day that I got the hamper, I just stuck it in the fridge so it could defrost. Once it was defrosted, I pulled it out. So I decided to do like a teriyaki marinade for it, because I thought that if I did a teriyaki on it, then it would be versatile for a whole range of different meals. The only problem was that I hadn't realised that it must have been like a catering bag. So the chicken must have been aimed at like a sandwich store or fish and chips or something like that. So the chicken was already filleted and it had already been velveted. So there was a cornstarch or something slurry within the bag to make it nice and tender, which is fine, except that I hadn't realised. And then I also marinated it in a teriyaki marinade that has cornstarch in it, because that helps to velvet the meat. Now, it just meant that the meat was really, really tender, like overly tender, a loss of texture to it, which is fine. It's just, it wouldn't have been the way I would have chosen to prepare it if I had have realised. So all I did was I made up the teriyaki marinade. I used it in, I made it with the Thermomix. And then I just coated all the chicken in the marinade and let it sit for an hour. If I had have realised, I probably should have rinsed the chicken first, and that would have washed off that first layer of cornstarch before I added the marinade to it, but I didn't realise at the time. I did notice when I was pulling the chicken out of the bag that there was a little bit of a slipperiness to the liquid in the bag, but it just didn't cross my mind until I realised once I was cooking it and tasted it that it obviously had been velveted. All I did was marinated the whole thing and then just grilled it all off. Just put it in the cast iron pan and fried it all off. That way it's cooked, it's in the fridge, and I can use it for a variety of different meals no matter how I want to eat them, and it's all just done and don't have to worry about the fact that it was raw chicken sitting in the fridge. For lunch I did the quick creamy ramen. I believe it's going around on social media, or has been, or like ages ago. I could be really late to it, but it reminds me of the way I do the pesto pasta. So I mix some powdered ramen flavouring with a couple of egg yolks, and I have tried it with the vegeta since that point, and I'd like to do a bit of a mix of flavours. I think vegeta, but with a few other things. With a couple of egg yolks and a few tablespoons of the homemade mayo. Then I cooked up the Jinmaling ramen noodles that I buy, the bulk ones that I've been buying that I'm really happy with, and in some hot water, boiling water. I then used the hot noodles and some of that noodle water to cook the egg mix and create a lovely creamy ramen style noodle soup, adding more pasta water as I went to get the consistency right. And then I served it with some of the sliced up teriyaki chicken, and I sliced up and grilled a bunch of the corn from one of the big tins of baby corn as well to go with it. So we did that creamy ramen noodle soup type thing for lunch with some of that teriyaki chicken. For dinner that night we had rice paper rolls because Apollo had requested them. So I cut a bunch of carrots and cucumber into ribbons. The cucumbers were from the hamper and needed using, so it was a good, when he requested them, I was okay with it because we had these things that needed using that were, good to use for that. I cooked some rice vermicelli in boiling water, rinsed it and then drizzled it with a little sesame oil. Wet my rice papers, filled with the noodles, chicken and the vegetable mix, and then rolled them up. We served them with a peanut butter hoisin style dipping sauce that I really like, and I was going to make the kids make some of their own, but I ended up just making them all. It was just simpler to just make them all for them. So it's another slightly fiddly meal, but it's very tasty, and I don't make as often as I should, especially in summer. I will need to work on getting the kids able to roll their own, like I want them to be able to roll their own sushi, and then I can just have the ingredients there ready to go and put them out, and they can roll the ones that they want, heat up a little bit of sauce in a saucepan, and it's ready to go. Definitely a good thing in summer when we have the stuff coming out of the garden as well. So the last day I have filmed for, I didn't film a dinner on, and we probably had leftovers, to be honest, but it was a good thing to end the week with okonomiyaki, because that is sort of falls into pretty much every what we eat in a week at least once, I find. Pizza generally happens each week, and okonomiyaki happens at least once. So I did my standard way of making the okonomiyaki, which is a Japanese cabbage pancake style dish. I do half a cabbage shredded nice and fine, half a dozen eggs, about 2 cups of flour, and 1 to 2 cups of water with a drizzle of soy sauce. I bring it all together until it resembles like a fritter batter. I say this every time, that it's a personal preference as to how you want the batter, whether you want the batter to be batter with a bit of cabbage in it, or whether you want just enough batter to hold the cabbage together. We like to have it more cabbage than batter. I don't want any pockets of batter within it. I just want the cabbage held together into the pancakes. But it's up to you what texture you want the batter. Like with any pancake batter, some people like to thin their pancake batter out so it spreads out on the pan. Some like it really thick so it puffs up. Personal preference there. I've started doing these in smaller pieces, like smaller servings. So I do it in the cast iron pan, and I do 4 of them at a time. I used to do just one big one in the middle, but then I'd have to make 8 before everyone got a single one. Whereas if I make them in small amounts, they can have a small one and come back for more when they want. We use some of the leftover teriyaki chicken to top it, some homemade Kewpie style mayo, and a little bit of ABC sweet soy sauce or ketchup mayonnaise on drizzling on top. It is a favorite meal, and anyone who hadn't heard of it and has tried it now always comes and tells me that they're so glad they tried it. So it's definitely worth giving a go. I probably need to do a video up doing it from scratch and with a few different choices of toppings and things like that, just to tickle people who don't know what it is and want to give it a go. So that was another week in what we eat in our household for mostly lunches and dinners. As I said, there was plenty of breakfasts in there too, but we just don't necessarily film them. I did make a big batch of sourdough granola, and I did film how I make my yogurt recently so that I can share that because some people were asking. So I've got that to share in another video. But this was a week's worth of food that we got made mostly from scratch. I do like a diverse range of food. I do like to enjoy eating, and I do enjoy cooking. Even though I don't want to do it every now and again, I do enjoy doing different things as well. I think I'd get very bored if I made the same thing over and over again. So I like to diversify what we're eating, and I like to try different foods. So when people give me recipes and stuff, I do definitely like to try them. Someone just gave me a recipe for, I'm super horrible with names, but someone in the comments the other day just gave me a recipe for cornbread, which is something I haven't tried yet. So I screenshotted that one, so we're going to give that one a go shortly, because everyone says about cornbread, and I've got the cracklings from when I rendered the lard last that apparently are really good at it too. So if there's anything you share, I definitely generally give it a go, so long as it's within the scope of what I think everyone will like, because I do enjoy just mixing up what we eat. It makes life more enjoyable, I think, having a diverse range of food. So thank you for joining me again today, and if this is the first video you've seen, then I would love a thumbs up and a subscribe. I always forget to mention that may be the first time I have asked in this entire lifetime of the channel, but and I will see everyone who normally watches on the next video. Thanks guys.